By the turn of the century, ocean liners had long become the number one form of transatlantic passenger service. Canada, a rapidly growing country at the time, very much knew this and so decided to invest their resources into the UK to Canada market, starting in late 1902. In February of 1903, the Canadian Pacific purchased the Elder Dempster Company, receiving 3 ships from the Beaver Line, their subsidiary. These 3 ships, Lake Champlain, Lake Erie, and Lake Manitoba, would be the first to sail on their company's established routes between Liverpool, England, and Montreal, Canada. Those 3 ships alone completed a total of 33 voyages in their first year, proving that an expansion of the fleet would be very much worthwhile. Because of this, in early 1904, Fairfield Shipbuilding and Engineering, located in Glasgow, Scotland, commenced work on a pair of new ships. The 2 ships would first be designed by Francis Elgar and were given the names Empress of Germany and Empress of Austria, but we will only be focusing on the latter. She would be a small ship with 2 funnels, 2 masts, and a maximum capacity of about 1,500 passengers. Finally, she would be able to go a service speed of around 18 knots, driven by twin 4-bladed props. The ship's keel was laid down on April 10, 1905. During this time, her name was changed to Empress of Ireland due to the politics surrounding the name Empress being tied to Austria. On January 27, 1906, she was launched, with her sister Empress of Britain already in fitting out. When completed, she topped in at 14,191 gross registered tons, with a length of about 570 feet. In terms of capacity, Empress of Ireland could carry up to 310 first-class passengers, 468 second-class passengers, and 764 third-class passengers. The accommodations were standard for the time, with first class getting cozy yet luxurious accommodations, with plenty of woodwork and decorations. Second class was a little less so, but from what I can see, was still cozy and spacious, with less woodwork and decorations than first class, but at least didn't have any pipes or cords showing, for the most part. Third class, on the other hand, wasn't very luxurious, with undecorated beams and ceilings, to the point where you could see the riveting holding the ship together. For someone just trying to make it into the New World, though, this was more than comfortable. Sadly, steerage was still abundant on ships, and Empress of Ireland was no exception. Basically, instead of having individual cabins for maybe up to 4 people, there would instead be large rooms, with beds accommodating with more than 20 people. This was considered by many as fourth class, but on Empress of Ireland, it only made up about 35% of third class. The RMS Empress of Ireland was finally handed over to her owners in June of 1906 and would make her maiden voyage on June 29, 1906. She first departed Liverpool on Thursday and by the next morning made port in Moville, North Ireland. While here, she picked up more Irish immigrants before she finally made way for the open ocean. In the afternoon of July 6th, she arrived at the mouth of the St. Lawrence River, stopping at a nearby port to pick up a river pilot who would assist in the voyage to Quebec City. The following morning, Empress of Ireland arrived at the city, offloading passengers and cargo. The voyage was very successful, with third class so overbooked that over 100 people had to stay behind and wait for another ship, showing how popular she was with immigrants. Overall, she carried 119 first class, 342 second class, and 796 third class, making for a total of 1,257 passengers. The reception was very good, with passengers saying how she was a safe and modern ship. Throughout the next 8 years of her life, Empress of Ireland would complete around 94 voyages, burning an average of 2,200 tons of coal during each one. When the seasons changed, she would alternate between ports, ending her voyages at Quebec City from May to October until the river would freeze over and she would have to end her voyages in Halifax, Nova Scotia. In 1907, Henry Kendall would be brought on as the first mate, which at the time wasn't important, but would become so on May 1st, 1914, when he was made captain of the ship. On May 28th, Empress of Ireland departed Quebec City, bound for Liverpool. On this voyage particularly, first class was underbooked, only carrying 87 passengers. Second class, on the other hand, was the opposite, with 253 passengers, half of which were Salvation Army members. Third class, as usual, was almost filled to capacity, with 717 passengers on board. In the morning hours of May 29th, Empress of Ireland reached her first port, where the river pilot who had helped her descend down the St. Lawrence River disembarked. As she left the port and continued her course, the lights from the SS Storstad appeared off her starboard bow. At first, this wasn't a problem, and both Empress of Ireland and Storstad knew very well of this. Very quickly, though, fog started to roll in, until it got to a point where they couldn't even see each other. Because of this, both ships resorted to the sounding of their whistles repeatedly. In order for a safe crossing, Captain Kendall positioned his ship so that they would pass each other's starboard side, but for some unknown reason, the captain of the Storstad had set a course which would take the ships past each other's port side. At 1:56 a.m., lights from the Storstad appeared off the Empress of Ireland's starboard side. As soon as they were seen, Captain Kendall ordered the ship hard to port, but Empress of Ireland was moving too slow and was unable to turn in time. Storstad crashed into Empress of Ireland's starboard side near midship, causing water to flood in at an astounding rate. Soon after, the ship lurched hard to starboard, creating a lift so bad that the port side lifeboats couldn't even be lowered. Many people tried to anyways, though, causing those lifeboats to get smashed by the hull, dumping the occupants into the freezing cold water. Meanwhile, below deck, water was flooding the ship so fast that the crew was unable to close the watertight doors, letting water flow through the whole ship. Only about 10 minutes into the sinking, Empress of Ireland lurched again to her starboard side. By this point, the ship was practically laying on her side, meaning that people still trapped inside could only escape through the ship's portholes. Eventually, the sinking slowed, and people assumed that the ship had hit bottom. But at 2:10 a.m., only 14 minutes after the collision, the bow of Empress of Ireland rose out of the water as the ship went under. Hundreds of passengers were thrown into the freezing water. Only 5 lifeboats managed to get away in time, meaning that most of the passengers would have to stay in the water until a rescue boat would save them. Both pilot boats Eureka and Lady Evelyn would eventually come for assistance, with Eureka picking up passengers from the now sunken Empress of Ireland and Lady Evelyn picking up passengers from the damaged but still intact Storstad. When they finally reached land, survivor numbers were able to be counted. Out of the 1,477 passengers and crew on board, 1,012 lost their lives. During the inquiry, both parties believed that the other was at fault. Captain Kendall of the Empress of Ireland had positioned his ship to pass starboard to starboard, while Captain Thomas Anderson of the Storstad had positioned his ship to pass port to port. In the end, full blame would be placed on the crew of the Storstad, as they attempted to pass port to port even though the regulations dictated the opposite. As for the quick sinking, that was the cause of many things, but ultimately came down to the crew not closing the watertight doors in time, the position at which Storstad made contact with the hull, and the open portholes, which allowed water to pour in as the ship listed harder and harder to starboard. Shortly after the inquiry ended, salvage work started on the wreck. Since the wreck was in relatively shallow water, this made it relatively easy for the divers to recover bodies and artifacts. The hard current made the dive very dangerous, though, as demonstrated when one of the divers, Edward Causaboom, slipped on the hull, causing him to fall 65 feet down, killing him from pressure. In 1964 and through the 1970s, more dives would take place, which recovered Marconi equipment, telemotors, and brass portholes. As of now, the wreck lying in 130 feet of water stands as a grim reminder of the horrible destruction caused by simple human error.
It was in the month of May of 1914 we took a liner that was bound for the old world. Captain Kendall and the Empress of Ireland taking immigrants back home for Henry Ford. 200 miles out in the St. Lawrence Strait, Salvation Army band was playing on the deck. When the fog came rolling in and the ships kept coming in, and the Empress, she was steaming towards